She backed into the cold glass wall of the 42nd floor, trapped by the man who had hunted her for 6 agonizing months. He smiled, thinking he had finally won. He had no idea the most dangerous crime boss in Chicago was watching them through the security cameras, already sending his men. Footsteps echoing on wet pavement had become Chloe Mercer's greatest terror. For 6 months, the 26-year-old financial analyst had lived in a constant state of hypervigilance, her life meticulously dismantled by a man she barely knew. It had started innocently enough with a 15-minute coffee date at Intelligentsia on Randolph Street. Bradley Peterson was a junior accountant at a partner firm, mild-mannered, quiet, and instantly forgettable. Chloe had politely declined a second date, citing her demanding work schedule at the prestigious advisory firm, occupying the 42nd floor of the Aon Center. She thought that was the end of it. She was wrong. Bradley's rejection curdled into a dark, suffocating obsession. It began with incessant emails, escalating to hundreds of text messages from burner numbers. Then came the physical presence. Chloe would look out the window of her Lincoln Avenue apartment to see his silver Honda Civic idling across the street. She found single dead roses left on her windshield in the private parking garage. When she went to the Chicago Police Department, Detective Ryan Gallagher had offered a sympathetic sigh, explaining that unless Bradley made a direct, physical threat, their hands were tied. A restraining order was just a piece of paper, and Bradley was careful never to cross the legal line into actionable assault. Work became her only sanctuary. The corporate high-rise downtown was a fortress of key-card entries, biometric scanners, and 24-hour security guards. Chloe poured herself into her quarterly financial models, frequently staying past 10 at night. Surrounded by the glittering skyline and the hum of industrial HVAC systems, she felt untouchable. What Chloe did not know was that the building had recently undergone a quiet transfer of ownership. The property was now the crown jewel of Costello Holdings, a legitimate real estate front for the largest, most ruthless organized crime syndicate in the Midwest. At the helm of this empire was Gabriel Costello. Gabriel was not a man who existed in the public eye. He operated from the shadows, running a multi-billion-dollar underworld enterprise from the penthouse suite on the 60th floor. He was a man of terrifying precision, cold calculations, and absolute control. His world was one of violence, loyalty, and vast wealth. Yet for the past 4 months, the ruthless mob boss had harbored a secret that would have shocked his most hardened lieutenants. He was entirely captivated by the quiet, exhausted financial analyst on floor 42. Gabriel had first noticed Chloe on the surveillance feeds during a routine late-night security audit. He had watched her kick off her heels under her desk, massaging her temples as she chewed on the end of a cheap blue pen, bathed in the glow of her dual monitors. There was a resilience in her posture, a quiet, desperate determination that drew him in. Soon, Gabriel found himself adjusting his brutal schedule just to ensure he was in his command center when she worked late. Through the building's state-of-the-art camera system, he memorized her habits. He knew she drank her coffee black by 8 p.m., that she listened to classical music to focus, and that she always flinched when the elevators chimed unexpectedly. Gabriel's fascination wasn't merely passive. The boss of the Chicago syndicate possessed resources the police could only dream of. When he noticed the dark circles under her eyes and the frantic way she checked her phone, he ordered his right-hand man, Dominic, to look into her life. Within 48 hours, Gabriel had a comprehensive dossier on Bradley Peterson. Gabriel knew everything. He knew Bradley's address, his internet search history, his sick fantasies, and his daily movements. Gabriel had already placed 2 of his most discreet enforcers outside Chloe's apartment building to ensure she was never harmed at home. He had been biding his time, waiting for the perfect, untraceable moment to permanently erase Bradley Peterson from existence without drawing police attention to Chloe. But Gabriel had underestimated the depth of the stalker's desperation. Bradley was unraveling. The restraint that had kept him out of prison was crumbling under the weight of his obsession. Fired from his own job for erratic behavior earlier that week, Bradley had spent the last 3 days parked in a rented sedan down the block from the Aeon Center, watching Chloe enter and leave the fortress. He realized he couldn't get to her on the street. She always took a rideshare directly from the lobby. If he wanted to finally confront her, to make her understand that they were meant to be together, he had to get inside. Bradley meticulously planned his infiltration. He spent days tracking the building's maintenance crew. On a rainy Tuesday evening, he followed a contracted janitor, Thomas Wright, to a local tavern. When Thomas stumbled to the bathroom, Bradley swiped the master access card from his jacket pocket. It was a golden key to the corporate fortress. Thursday night brought a massive thunderstorm rolling off Lake Michigan, drowning the city in sheets of grey rain. Chloe was alone on the 42nd floor, racing to finish a merger valuation for a Friday morning deadline. The floor was completely empty, the overhead lights dimmed to a low, energy-saving hum. Outside, lightning flashed, casting long, jagged shadows across the polished marble floors. Down in the lobby, the security desk was momentarily vacant as the primary guard responded to a water leak in the basement. Bradley Peterson walked through the revolving doors, dripping wet, his eyes wide and feverish. He scanned his stolen keycard at the turnstile. A tiny green light flashed. Access granted. Bradley stepped into the express elevator, pressing the button for floor 42. The hunt was over. He was finally going to claim what belonged to him, entirely unaware that he had just stepped into the heavily guarded domain of a predator far more dangerous than himself. Rain lashed furiously against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 42nd floor. Chloe Mercer typed the final sequence of numbers into her spreadsheet, exhaling a long, shaky breath. The digital clock in the corner of her screen glowed 11:14 p.m. She rubbed her burning eyes and reached for her cold cup of coffee. The sprawling office was eerily silent, save for the rhythmic drumming of the storm outside and the occasional groan of the skyscraper settling in the high winds. A sharp, distinct chime cut through the quiet. Chloe froze. It was the sound of the main elevator arriving on her floor. Her heart instantly accelerated, hammering against her ribs. She strained her ears, listening intently. Usually the cleaning crew came through around 9, and the security patrol wasn't due until midnight. She slowly lowered her coffee cup back to the desk, her fingers trembling slightly. "Hello?" she called out, her voice sounding entirely too small in the cavernous, darkened office space. "Is someone there?" No answer. Just the heavy, oppressive silence. Then she heard it. The unmistakable squeak of wet rubber soles on the polished hardwood hallway. Someone was walking slowly, deliberately, down the central corridor toward the open-plan cubicles. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded her veins. Chloe slid out of her chair, dropping to her knees beneath her heavy mahogany desk. She fumbled for her phone, her thumb frantically searching for the emergency dial button. Before she could press the screen, a shadow stretched across the carpet, cast by the dim emergency lighting. "I know you're here, Chloe," a voice whispered. It was Bradley. A suppressed sob caught in Chloe's throat. How did he get in? The building was supposed to be secure. She covered her mouth with both hands, tears of absolute terror welling in her eyes. "You can't ignore me forever." Bradley's voice drifted closer, laced with a sickening, melodic calm. "I saw your light on from the street. You work too hard, Chloe. You need someone to take care of you. Someone who really understands you." 60 floors above, In a dimly lit, state-of-the-art surveillance suite, Gabriel Costello stood frozen before a wall of glowing monitors. He had been in the middle of a tense negotiation with a supplier from Detroit, a tumbler of imported whiskey in his hand. But the moment the proximity alarm for floor 42 silently flashed on the secondary screens, his attention had snapped away from the business at hand. Gabriel watched the high-definition infrared feed with a growing, icy rage. He saw the soaked figure of Bradley Peterson prowling through the cubicles. He saw Chloe, huddled under her desk, shaking in pure terror. The crystal tumbler in Gabriel's hand shattered. The Detroit supplier stopped mid-sentence, startled by the sharp crack of breaking glass. Amber liquid dripped from Gabriel's clenched fist, mingling with a thin line of blood. Dominic, Gabriel's imposing head of security, instantly stepped forward from the shadows of the room. "Boss?" Dominic asked, his voice low and dangerous, instantly recognizing the shift in Gabriel's demeanor. "The 42nd floor," Gabriel commanded, his voice a lethal, vibrating baritone that left no room for hesitation. "Someone bypassed the perimeter. He's hunting her." Dominic's eyes darted to the monitors. He didn't need further explanation. Every man in Gabriel's inner circle knew about the boss's silent obsession with the blonde analyst. "I'll send the lobby team up." "No," Gabriel snarled, grabbing a suppressed Heckler & Koch USP from the biometric safe embedded in his desk. He wiped the blood from his hand onto his tailored suit jacket. "Lock down the elevators. Kill the stairwell access doors. He doesn't leave this building alive. I am going down there myself." Down on the 42nd floor, Bradley was getting frustrated. He began tearing through the office, knocking over chairs and sweeping stacks of paper off desks. "Come out, Chloe," he shouted, his voice cracking with unhinged rage. "I did everything for you. I loved you when nobody else did. You think you're better than me?" Chloe crawled backward, trying to maneuver toward the secondary fire exit on the east wing. If she could just reach the heavy metal door, she could lock herself in the stairwell and run down to the lobby. She stayed low, using the fabric partitions as cover. She reached the edge of the finance department, just 10 feet from the glowing red exit sign. She made a break for it. Her high heels clacked against the exposed concrete flooring as she sprinted. She threw her weight against the push bar of the fire door, but it didn't budge. The electronic mag lock was engaged. She shoved it again, sobbing in desperation. "Found you!" Chloe spun around, her back hitting the cold steel of the unyielding door. Bradley stood at the end of the corridor, chest heaving, his rain-soaked clothes plastered to his skin. His eyes were wide, dilated, and completely devoid of sanity. In his right hand, he clutched a heavy steel wrench. "Why are you running from me?" Bradley whined, taking a slow, menacing step forward. "I just want to talk. I just want you to see that we belong together." "Bradley, please," Chloe begged, her voice trembling violently. "Please, just leave. I won't call the police. Just let me go." "No," Bradley snapped, slamming the wrench into the glass wall of the nearest conference room. The glass spider-webbed with a deafening crack. "You're going to listen to me. You're going to love me." He lunged forward, grabbing her by the collar of her silk blouse and throwing her hard against the wall. Chloe screamed, squeezing her eyes shut, waiting for the impact of the steel wrench. But the blow never came. Instead, the office was plunged into absolute pitch-black darkness as the entire floor's power grid was intentionally cut. Bradley froze, his grip loosening slightly on Chloe's shirt in his confusion. "What happened to the lights?" he muttered, from the shadows at the opposite end of the corridor. A single, calm voice echoed through the darkness. It was a voice that commanded empires, smooth as silk and heavy as lead. "You made a very grave mistake coming into my building, Bradley." A slow, rhythmic clapping of expensive leather shoes began to approach from the darkness. Bradley spun around, raising the wrench blindly into the void. "Who's there?" Bradley screamed, his false bravado crumbling instantly. "Security! I'll kill her! I swear I'll kill her!" "You aren't going to do anything," the deep voice responded, moving closer, completely unfazed by the threat. Suddenly, the emergency backup lights flickered on, casting an eerie crimson glow across the corridor. Standing 30 feet away was Gabriel Costello. He was flanked by 4 massive men in tailored suits, all holding silenced weapons leveled directly at Bradley's chest. Gabriel's dark eyes locked onto Bradley with a predatory emptiness that made the air in the room turn to ice. Gabriel slowly raised his hand, pointing a single finger at the Stalker. "Step away from what is mine." Bradley's hands trembled violently as the crimson emergency lights bathed the corridor in a sinister, bloody hue. The wrench, previously wielded as a weapon of absolute dominance over Chloe, suddenly felt incredibly heavy and useless. He looked at Gabriel Costello, taking in the bespoke Italian suit, the chilling stillness of the mob boss's posture, and the 4 suppressed firearms pointed directly at his head. Bradley was a coward who preyed on vulnerable women. Faced with actual, lethal predators, his mind short-circuited. "I don't know who you are," Bradley stammered, his voice pitching an octave higher as he pressed his back against the shattered glass of the conference room. He completely released his grip on Chloe's blouse, raising his empty left hand in a desperate gesture of surrender. "This is a misunderstanding. She's my girlfriend. We just had a fight. I have clearance to be in this building." Gabriel let out a low, humorless chuckle that reverberated through the empty office. It was a sound completely devoid of warmth. He gestured sharply with 2 fingers. Before Bradley could comprehend the command, Dominic closed the 30-foot gap with terrifying speed. The massive head of security didn't even draw his weapon. He simply drove his knee into Bradley's abdomen with the force of a freight train. The Stalker collapsed to the floor instantly, vomiting a mixture of cheap beer and stomach acid onto the expensive corporate carpeting, wheezing desperately for air. Gabriel didn't spare the gasping man another glance. His dark, piercing eyes shifted entirely to Chloe. She was sliding down the wall, her knees finally giving out as the adrenaline crashed. She hugged her arm around her chest, gasping for breath, her wide blue eyes darting between the armed men and the man who had just saved her life. "Dominic," Gabriel said, his voice softening just a fraction, though the undeniable edge of authority remained. "Secure the perimeter. Sweep the elevators. Make sure this piece of trash didn't bring anyone else into my territory." Gabriel slowly closed the distance between himself and Chloe, deliberately keeping his hands visible so he wouldn't startle her further. He stopped a few feet away, crouching down gracefully so he was at her eye level. Up close, Chloe could see the fine details of his face, the sharp jawline, the faint scar crossing his left eyebrow, and eyes that held centuries of unspoken violence, yet looked upon her with profound, unsettling reverence. "Are you hurt, Chloe?" Gabriel asked softly, his baritone voice a stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. "How do you know my name?" Chloe whispered, her vocal cords raw. She flinched as thunder rattled the heavy window panes beside them. "Who are you?" "My name is Gabriel. I own this building, and for the last 4 months, I have made it my personal responsibility to ensure you are safe," he replied, slipping off his tailored suit jacket. He draped the heavy, warm fabric over her trembling shoulders. It smelled of expensive cologne and faint cigar smoke. "I apologize for not acting sooner. I wanted to eliminate the threat without drawing the attention of the Chicago Police Department to your doorstep. Detective Ryan Gallagher is a fool, but he is a nosy fool." Chloe's breath hitched. "You know about Detective Gallagher? I only spoke to him once, in a private interview room. I know everything, Chloe, Gabriel stated, standing up and turning his attention back to the pathetic figure groaning on the floor. Bradley was trying to crawl toward the exit, his fingers slipping on the polished wood. Gabriel walked over and firmly planted his polished leather Oxford onto Bradley's wrist, pinning his hand to the floor. Bradley let out a high-pitched shriek of pain as the bones ground together under the mob boss's immense pressure. Bradley Peterson, Gabriel stated, his voice ringing with absolute authority. 31 years old, formerly employed at Hughes and Associates until you were fired on Tuesday for misappropriation of company resources and erratic behavior. You bank at Chase. You live in a miserable studio apartment in Oak Park, and for the last 6 months you have made the fatal error of terrorizing a woman who falls under my protection. Please, Bradley sobbed, tears streaming down his flushed face, his nose running as he looked up at the towering crime boss. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know she was connected. I'll leave Chicago. I'll never talk to her again. Just let me go. Gabriel leaned down, grabbing Bradley by the collar of his soaked jacket and dragging him up to his knees. The silencers of the 4 enforcers immediately tracked the stalker's head. You see, Bradley, Gabriel whispered, his tone conversational, which only made it more horrifying. If you had just been a nuisance, I might have simply broken your legs and exiled you to Gary, Indiana. But you broke into my building. You stole a key card from Thomas Wright, a hard-working janitor. You terrified the woman I care about. You brought a weapon into her workspace. You have crossed lines that cannot be uncrossed. Gabriel looked over his shoulder at Dominic, who had returned from his sweep. Is the loading dock clear? Clear, boss, Dominic replied, his face entirely expressionless. The surveillance feeds in the basement have been wiped, and the transport van is waiting. We have a private incinerator out in Cicero that hasn't been used since the winter. Bradley began to scream, thrashing violently against Gabriel's iron grip. No, you can't do this. I have rights. I'll call the cops. The police cannot hear you, Bradley, Gabriel said, signaling 2 of his men. They immediately stepped forward, grabbing Bradley by his arms and hauling him off his feet. One of the men efficiently gagged the stalker with a cloth, silencing his hysterical screams into muffled grunts of pure terror. Take him down through the freight elevator. Make sure he understands exactly why his life is ending before you finish it. Chloe watched in stunned silence as the men dragged Bradley down the hallway. The stalker's eyes were wide with the realization of his own impending death, locked onto Chloe in a final desperate plea for mercy. But as Chloe watched the man who had ruined her life for half a year being dragged into the darkness, she felt no pity. She felt only a cold, profound sense of relief. The threat was gone, permanently. Gabriel turned back to her, extending his hand. Come with me, Chloe. This floor is a crime scene, and you look like you need a drink. Elevator doors made of brushed steel slid shut, sealing Chloe and Gabriel inside the private executive lift. The glowing digital display above the door rapidly counted upward, bypassing the standard floors and ascending directly toward the 60th floor penthouse. Chloe leaned against the mirrored wall, clutching Gabriel's suit jacket tightly around her shoulders. The adrenaline was slowly ebbing away, leaving behind a profound, aching exhaustion. She looked sideways at the man standing beside her. Gabriel Costello was intimidating in a way that defied simple physical presence. He radiated absolute power, a quiet confidence that could only come from a lifetime of enforcing his will upon the world. Yet he hadn't touched her with anything but the utmost gentleness. You're Gabriel Costello, Chloe finally said, the pieces clicking together in her tired mind. The CEO of Costello Holdings, the holding company that bought out my advisory firm 3 months ago. Gabriel kept his eyes fixed straight ahead, though a faint, approving smile touched the corners of his mouth. You are as intelligent as your quarterly reports suggest. Yes, I acquired the firm. It was the most efficient way to ensure you remained in this building, under my security network, without alerting you to my presence. Chloe's mind spun. You spent $60 million buying a corporate advisory firm just to keep an eye on me. The elevator chimed, and the doors glided open to reveal a sprawling, breathtaking penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic, unbroken view of the stormy Chicago skyline, the city lights glittering like scattered diamonds against the dark waters of Lake Michigan. The decor was modern but expensive: dark mahogany, black marble, and plush leather furniture. "Money is merely a tool, Chloe," Gabriel said, stepping out and guiding her into the expansive living area. "I have more wealth than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. What I did not have was you. I saw you working late one night on the surveillance feeds. I saw the way you carried the weight of the world on your shoulders, the way you looked over your shoulder every time you left the lobby. I ordered Dominic to investigate, and when I discovered what Bradley Peterson was doing to you, I decided to intervene on my own terms." He led her to a massive leather sofa in the center of the room. "Sit. Please. I have Dr. William Carter on standby. He is a discreet private physician on my payroll. I want him to look at your neck." Chloe reached up, her fingers brushing against her collarbone. She winced. Bradley had gripped her harder than she realized, leaving the beginning of angry purple bruises against her pale skin. She sat down on the soft leather, sinking into the cushions. Gabriel walked over to a crystal decanter, resting on a silver tray. He poured a generous measure of amber liquid into 2 glasses, walking back and handing one to her. "Drink. It will steady your nerves." Chloe took a sip. The whiskey burned smoothly down her throat, sending a rush of warmth into her freezing limbs. She looked up at Gabriel, who had taken a seat in an armchair opposite her, his intense gaze never leaving her face. "You had him killed," Chloe said flatly, the reality of the situation finally settling over her. She wasn't asking a question. She was stating a fact. "The man who just attacked me. Your men are going to kill him." Gabriel didn't flinch. He didn't offer a polite lie or a sugar-coated justification. He simply nodded. "By dawn, Bradley Peterson will be reduced to ash in a high-temperature industrial furnace. There will be no body, no police investigation, and no trial. He will simply cease to exist, and you will never have to look over your shoulder again." A normal woman might have screamed. A normal woman might have run for the elevator, terrified of the ruthless monster sitting across from her. But Chloe had spent the last 6 months living in fear, failed by the system, failed by the police, and forced to shrink herself down to survive. Looking at Gabriel Costello, she didn't see a monster. She saw a shield. She saw an angel of death who had decided to wrap his wings around her. "Why?" Chloe asked, her voice steadying, the tremor finally disappearing. "You could have just hired bodyguards for me. You didn't have to bring me up here. You didn't have to reveal yourself." Gabriel set his glass down on the glass coffee table, leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees. The predator in him was entirely focused on her. "Because I am done watching you from the shadows, Chloe. I bought this building to protect you. I eliminated your stalker to free you. But I brought you up here because I want you to stay. I operate in a world of violence and betrayal, a world where trust is the rarest currency. But when I look at you, I see someone I would burn this entire city to the ground to keep safe." He reached across the table, his large, calloused hand gently covering her trembling fingers. His touch was warm, grounding her in the reality of the penthouse. "You have lived in fear for long enough," Gabriel murmured, his thumb lightly stroking her knuckles. "Stay with me. Let me give you the world you deserve. Nobody will ever dare to disrespect you, threaten you, or hurt you again. You will have the power of the entire Costello Syndicate standing behind you." Chloe looked into his dark, mesmerizing eyes. She thought of her tiny, insecure apartment. She thought of the pathetic, useless restraining order sitting on her kitchen counter. Then she looked around the fortress in the sky, protected by an army of loyal enforcers, ruled by a man who had already proven he would kill for her without a second thought. She didn't want to go back to being a victim. She wanted the power he was offering. Chloe turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through Gabriel's. She squeezed his hand firmly, a fierce, beautiful determination igniting in her eyes. "Tell your doctor he can come in now. And Gabriel, I take my coffee black." Gabriel's smile was devastating, predatory, and entirely victorious. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. "I know, Mia Regina. I know." The storm outside raged on, thunder shaking the foundations of the city. But inside the penthouse, Chloe Mercer had never felt safer. She had lost a stalker, but she had gained a king, and the Chicago underworld would soon learn to bow to their new queen. That concludes the intense, chilling, and thrilling saga of Chloe and Gabriel. Did you expect the crime boss to step out of the shadows and claim her like that? Let us know in the comments if you want to see more stories where the Dark Protector completely destroys the villain. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please smash that like button, share it with your fellow dark romance lovers, and subscribe for more high-stakes drama. Turn on notifications, and we will see you in the next gripping episode.